Hey there, welcome back to Chris's Fantasy Space. My name is Chris. This is the show where I talk about some of my favourite books. Today we're going to get back to fantasy after all that horror shenanigans back in October. And I thought one video that I really wanted to make to sort of show off a little bit of my some of my favourite stories that I've ever read in terms of fantasy would be to tell you what my top 5 fantasy books are. So that is what I'm going to do in this video. Obviously, you know, I've put a bit of thought into this, obviously, because I wanted to make a video on it, but things can change. And obviously, even when I started making this list a while ago, I look down at it now and I'm thinking, man, some other stuff could have got in here, and maybe I don't necessarily agree with this now, but your taste changes over time. But this is definitely a list of 5 fantasy books that I absolutely adore. If you disagree with my list at all, obviously just put yours down in the comments there. Tell me where I went wrong, even though, it's like my opinion. So can I be wrong about my opinion? I don't know. Maybe I can. Anyway, let's start off. Book number 5. Gonna make some people hate me already. This is a controversial pick. I've gone with The Great Hunt from the Wheel of Time series. This is book 2 of the Wheel of Time. And I knew that I had to get something of the Wheel of Time in this list somewhere. Now, the Wheel of Time is a book series that so many people have talked about at such great length. And it's something that I've got so much respect for. And I loved so much of the Wheel of Time. Parts of it I thought maybe got a bit long in the tooth here and there, and there are so many names that you have to keep up with. You almost have to have like a pad of paper, I felt at times, to really understand who all of these Aes Sedai and the Sean Chan and all these other groups that you just need to keep on top of. But especially those early books, up until like books 4, 5, 6, somewhere around there, it's so engaging. And I think The Great Hunt, I've picked it to be maybe a little bit controversial, but also there are some great parts of this story. I love The Eye of the World. Shadow Rising is obviously an incredible one. A Memory of Light, I thought, I know it's a controversial opinion, but I think it brought the story together in a really cool way. And I think Brandon Sanderson did a really good job when he took over after Robert Jordan died. But I did really struggle to pick. The reason that I went with this, I think Eye of the World, the first book, just here was the one that I was potentially going to put. But I think the problem is sometimes it feels almost a little bit too Tolkien-esque, and I know that was kind of the idea, and I definitely think by the end of Eye of the World it shakes that off, and it's actually very, very different how that one ends. But I think The Great Hunt is a real statement book. It's a real statement from Robert Jordan about how he was going to take his fantasy series and how he was going to make this world where the Wheel of Time is set, make it seem so real and so deep. Again, I don't want to really spoil anything here, but there's so many awesome bits that happen with like Rand being trained by Lan, the party like properly splitting up and going their own way, Nynaeve's test when they actually get to the White Tower itself finally being a major part of the story, the introduction of Lanfear, and then the ending of this book is incredible. I don't want to spoil anything, but the fight in the sky is all I'll say. Absolutely incredible scene. So cool. Like I said, I think this was where the Wheel of Time really kicked on, and you could kind of see where this story was going to go and just how big and impressive it was going to be. And although I've picked my favorite as being only the second book, so quite early on, there's still some amazing parts later, like the Battle of Ravin comes to mind. Dumai's Wells obviously being a massive turning point and such a crazy scene. Definitely, if you don't know about the Wheel of Time somehow and you're into fantasy, you've got to give it a go. But there is obviously I think it's Amazon are making the series, aren't they? So that will be coming out hopefully sometime soon. Obviously, coronavirus stopped filming and everything, but that will be there soon as well. So maybe try and get it in there before that series comes out. Great Hunt, my number 5. Okay, on to number 4. Now, number 4, is this a controversial pick? In the fantasy book world, I think this is. I've gone with Assassin's Quest. This is my very old battered copy of Assassin's Quest. I'm waiting for the really nice illustrated version of this to come out in 2021, but this was my first copy of it, Assassin's Quest, the 3rd book, so the final book in the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. I've seen hate out there for this series. I don't understand it. I absolutely adore the Farseer trilogy. Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and then Assassin's Quest being the 3rd one. I've seen some hate out there, and I just I genuinely don't understand it. Robin Hobb is an incredible author. I don't think I've read anyone who writes people so emotionally on point. Fitzchivalry Farseer is the the main protagonist in this series, and I genuinely think he might be my favorite protagonist that I've ever read. There's definitely better than some very, very overrated protagonists for certain stories. I'm looking at you, Name of the Wind. I'm looking at you there. The reason that this one sticks out for me so much is because I think it was the first kind of adult fantasy series that I got into, and it just came from me, growing out of things like the Harry Potter series. I was really into like the Darren Shan kind of horror fantasy books back in the day, and I wanted something that was a bit more high fantasy and maybe a little bit more adult. And from Googling, I found this series and I just immediately fell in love with it. Like I said earlier, Fitzgivery, or Fitz as he just becomes known throughout the story, goes through some horrible stuff. And the way that Robin Hobb writes him just makes you fall in love. And I will never forget his story and where he begins to where he ends this first trilogy, because there are subsequent trilogies as well that include him. But I think the first three, if you finish at the end of them, it's a good story. It does leave you kind of wanting more. And one thing I will say is the way that this book ends and some of the choices that Robin Hobb makes about what is going to happen to Fitz and what is going to happen to the characters around him absolutely floored me at the time. I genuinely was left at the end of this book an emotional wreck. I couldn't. It felt like someone had just like reached in and just pulled my heart out. Absolutely incredible. If you're into the idea of royal political intrigue and kind of interesting nature-based magic systems, then this series, the Farseer trilogy, is definitely something that should be on your list to read. Absolutely incredible series. I loved it. And I picked the third one. I could have probably picked Assassin's Apprentice because it's a great introduction, but I just think the choices that Robin Hobb makes at the end of this book are so bold and brave. And I love Fitzgivery Farseer. Apparently she hates him with some of the stuff she puts him through in this book, but what a series. Definitely needs to be up there if you're into modern fantasy. Okay, on to my number 3 book, and it is Changes by Jim Butcher. It's the 12th Dresden Files book. Now I know what you're thinking. 12th? Like, oh my goodness, why is your favorite book in the series the 12th one? Well, if you know anything about the Dresden Files, you will know already why Changes is my favorite so far. What an incredible book. Absolutely insane, some of the stuff that happens in this story. Some of you might be sat there put off, like I said, about it being the 12th one, but they're not massive books, and once you get into them, they're very sort of action packed and they're quite quick to get through. I've managed. I think I'm on the 13th ghost story just here, and they are getting a little bit longer as the more recent ones, but they are so enjoyable, so fun to read. The way that magic works is quite obviously not realistic because it's magic, but it kind of feels a bit grounded, and that's something that helps you with the semi-realism of this book, because the Dresden Files are what we would, I guess, call urban fantasy. So they're set in real modern day Chicago, and magic and the technological world have a very specific relationship that I think Jim Butcher does a great job of keeping working or not working together, as the case may be. The reason that I've gone with Changes, the 12th book in the series, as my number 3 of all time is because those 11 books before, you almost get into sort of you fall into a kind of formula of, okay, Harry Dresden, main character, he's a wizard. He is a wizard for hire, and people come to him with their problems and he sorts it out. And then obviously things get crazy, the first few books, there's a vampire, there's a werewolf, there are ghosts. And it almost starts to feel a bit formulaic. Still really fun, but kind of like almost like a urban fantasy by numbers. The more it progresses, you get kind of used to that. And then when they start to change a little bit and when things start to go a little bit more wrong, there's real impact. And the reason that Changes is so good is because it does what it says in the tin. It changes everything for this character of Harry Dresden. And some of the decisions that Jim Butcher makes Harry make in this book are absolutely incredible. And everything has a weight and impact and consequences. This book is called Changes. It could have been called Consequences, because everything has a real punch and a real impact based on what you've read in here. Some of you might know I'm a big DC Comics fan as well. I'm a big Batman fan, and one of the major enemies of Batman is Ra's al Ghul, and the reason they're enemies is because Ra's al Ghul wants Batman to become the next head of the League of Assassins, and Batman's always like, no, I don't want to do this. And the reason that I bring that up is because the some of the decisions that Harry Dresden makes in this book are kind of like as though he was Batman in that situation, but instead of saying no, maybe there's a situation where what if Batman had to say yes to that? What if Batman had to say yes to becoming what he's always fought against? And that kind of storytelling has just always been so interesting to me. What if your main character is forced to become what they've always hated? And that's why Change is such a fantastic book. And if you've not heard of Dresden Files before, or it's not something you've been interested in, definitely worth giving it a try, and definitely worth getting through the first few books to really see what the series is all about. So number 3 is Changes in the Dresden Files. Okay, you ready for some controversy? Book 2, my second favourite fantasy book of all time. Yes, you knew we were going to have to talk about him at some point. George R.R. Martin, obviously A Song of Ice and Fire. I have gone with the 3rd book in that series. This is just one book. It's just in the 2 parts of paperback here. It is A Storm of Swords. Okay. Now, obviously, I could have definitely gone with book 1 here, A Game of Thrones, which is just up there behind me. Definitely could have gone with that one. Incredible book. Those of you that know the story well know that that ending is such a massive gut punch, and what a great world-building book. But really, the reason that I've gone with A Storm of Swords is because it just has so many massive moments in it. Now, what I want us all to try and do, and I know this is so hard, and I find this super hard as well at points, let's just all forget everything to do with HBO and to do with live action adaptations of fantasy series because it will make me angry, frankly. At different times, this book, the 3rd in the series of A Song of Ice and Fire, genuinely feels like George R.R. Martin has gone, oh, here's 2 books to introduce you to great characters. Yeah, I'm going to kill a few off on the way as well, but we're going to get to the 3rd one and we're going to really pick the story up now. And then what it feels like he does is it feels like he reaches through these pages and just punches you straight in the face while kicking you in the balls and slapping you and then kind of giving you a little hug as well at the end as well. But so much stuff happens in this story, and I don't think I've ever had one where I was reading chapter by chapter just not knowing what could possibly happen next. Absolutely incredible. Obviously, everyone's watched the TV show now, so everyone knows these amazing moments. And if you think back to the TV show, everything incredible that happens in like the series 3, 4, that sort of era, all of those amazing things are from this book. It is absolutely jammed packed with surprises, shocks, and weddings. Yeah, it's such an incredible book. Yes, the ending of A Game of Thrones is iconic and such an amazing moment, but this is the book where George R.R. Martin really sits you down and goes, oh, so you thought we were going to have, good versus evil, typical fantasy tale. Oh, my sweet summer child. Seth Sonson Volano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king. Yes, of course, my number 1 is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I mean, I could have picked Words of Radiance, I could have picked Oathbringer, I could have picked The Final Empire, the first Mistborn book, I could have picked Warbreaker. I am a massive Brandon Sanderson fan, as you can tell by my collection of his work over there. I genuinely think that The Way of Kings, this book right here, is the best first entry into a new fantasy series of all time. I think it is absolutely incredible. I know, obviously, I'm just going to say this is my number 1, obviously, and I'm going to speak about why I think it's so amazing as I go through talking about this, but I genuinely think that the Stormlight Archive, of which we've got the 4th book coming out this month, actually, November of 2020, I genuinely think people will look back on this series when it's finished as the modern pinnacle of fantasy, up there with your Lord of the Rings, your Wheel of Time. I genuinely think this is where Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive is going. Obviously, one of the things that people love most about Brandon Sanderson is his care and detail that he puts into making magic systems. And the magic system or systems that there is in the Stormlight Archive is no different. The idea of this whole world called Roshar, which has got this magic storm that literally crashes across the whole continent and can cause people to be able to have these magic powers by infusing this thing called Stormlight, is incredible. And I know obviously I'm talking a lot, and obviously if you don't know the story very well, it's hard to really give you an elevator pitch for this because it is so massive. Like they are huge. They're 1,000-page books at least, and short novellas as well that come into it. If I can really sell it to you, the characters, you just immediately fall in love with these characters. I'm currently doing a reread of these books. I'm almost finished, ready for the fourth one to actually come out. And even characters that I wasn't even that sure about on my first read through, I'm now reading with a whole new light and a whole new love for them. Brandon Sanderson also is absolutely incredible at giving you characters and then slowly revealing more and more things about their history and details about them to fill in the gaps and to keep the sort of intrigue going on about them. Through each of the books, he picks one of his major characters. Way of Kings is the character of Kaladin, who is an incredible protagonist. What a character Kaladin is. And gives you these flashbacks every now and then through the book about some of the terrible things that have happened to him in the past. One of the reasons that I picked The Way of Kings over the others is because Kaladin is my favourite character in the series, and I don't think that's a very controversial opinion for fans of the Stormlight Archive. And one of the reasons that I think that is because Brandon Sanderson has taken this amazing action hero character and has given them a massive flaw in how they do things. And one of the things that is a flaw for Kaladin is the idea that he has this huge depression that clouds him at times throughout the story. And I don't think I've read anything, especially in fantasy, where that compares to the care and attention that Brandon Sanderson puts into these very human and difficult topics and emotions, but in a fantasy space. The other thing that's obviously really important to say is when you're reading these, I know these books are so big, they're massive, but like Brandon Sanderson is the absolute king of getting to the last third of the book and going, okay, you're going to have to read this now. I know it's going to take you until 4 a.m. and you need to be up at 6:30, but you need to be finishing this now. There's no possible way you could put this book down when you get to a certain part in it. And that just builds and builds the further through the series you get and the more you end up loving these characters. So I don't really want to say anything more about it because I don't want to spoil anything. I don't want to get into any more specifics with it, but The Way of Kings, absolutely my number one fantasy book. I absolutely adore this series, and if you're into epic high fantasy but with real and really well fleshed out characters, you've got to get in there with this series. It's incredible. It's my absolute favorite. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this a like if you enjoyed this. Give me a like if you agreed with any of my picks. If there's something that you think I missed out, or if there's something that you think I would absolutely adore and I haven't put into my list and you want to recommend it to me, please put that down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you on the next Chris's Fantasy Space.